Will. Good to have you here today at DKJ Health Hub. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Kieran. Nice to see you. So, yeah, my name is Will Ellis. I'm the Managing Director here at BW Healthcare Surveyors. So, we are a specialist firm of primary care surveyors, and we assist practices up and down the country, all over the UK, in fact, with various premises-related matters from notional rent reviews all the way through to potential sale and leasebacks, which I know is something we're going to be talking about today.
Super. Thanks so much, Will. Yes, well, the first thing we're going to be speaking about is succession planning.
Yep.
One of the frequently asked questions that we get asked by our practices. So, to a complete novice, what is succession planning?
I mean, I guess purely from a premises related matters, which is obviously what we deal with. Succession planning is just really understanding what practices need to do or need to think of when it comes to recruiting new GPs or retiring of GPs, what to do with their premises. So there are several options that practices need to think about, and it's just understanding, I guess, what those options are, and putting a plan in place to ensure that they're not running around like headless chickens towards with 2 months to go of their retirement, wondering what they're going to do with the premises and what they're going to do with the practice. So it's just kind of preempting it all, really, maybe 2 or 3 years before that happens, and just putting a plan in place to understand what they're going to be doing with their premises and the surgery.
So when you're saying about a plan, what sort of plan should be put in place? I appreciate it's a succession plan, but what sort of things should practices be considering? And you're saying it's 2 or 3 years before a partner retires?
Just as early as possible, I think. It's just understanding what your options are. So, I mean, I guess there are several options that practices can think about when it comes to retirement. So, if they've got a partner that is due to retire, I guess the first thing that they're always going to think about is recruiting a new GP partner. So one GP partner leaves, and it's just about getting another GP partner to come in and take over. That is the easiest thing to do. And if that is possible, then that is probably the first port of call for most practices, for most exiting GP partners. But I think recruiting of GP partners is a real issue nationwide. And it just seems to be harder and harder now to try and find new GPs that are wanting to become partners. And that's when a succession plan can be most useful, just understanding what your alternative options are. So things like sale and leaseback is certainly an alternative option, where you could get an external investor to come in and purchase the premises. So if you're in an owner-occupied practice, the surgery is owned by the GP partners. One of the biggest issues, I think, for recruiting GP partners is the fact that they're going to have to find what is often hundreds of thousands of pounds for a small share in the premises, and that can be quite off-putting for partners. Now, if you go through a sale and leaseback, you then switch the ownership of the premises from an owner-occupied practice to a leasehold surgery, and so any incoming GP partners aren't actually having to find any money to buy into the partnership. They're just going to have to be signatories on the lease. And from our experience, practices who are in leasehold premises find it a little bit easier to recruit than those that are in owner-occupied. So certainly looking at potential sale and leaseback is an option. Alternatively, if exiting partners don't want to sell the premises and they want to keep hold of the premises, they could look at putting a lease in place themselves. So rather than the retiring partner selling his share or selling their share, they could become landlords themselves, but put a lease in place to the remaining partners. And then what that means is actually incoming partners have a choice. Incoming partners can either buy into the practice and be owners of the premises and be landlords like the retiring GPs, or they could just be tenants and just be signatories on the lease. So it allows a bit of flexibility there as well. So I think from a premises point of view, sale and lease back or potentially putting a lease in place is an option. There's also the options of perhaps joining a super partnership or merging with a local practice within the PCN. Which joins forces. A merger is what it's often called, but in the case of retiring partners, and I had a conversation this morning with a practice who will look at merging with a practice, but actually they're acquiring that practice because that practice is a smaller practice. The partners are leaving. There's going to be no partners left at the surgery, so the practice, our clients are actually looking at acquiring that surgery. So mergers certainly an option. And then the other thing to think about is potentially just transferring the contracts to another entity. So there are specialist organizations out there now who can look at taking over the contract, who can look at potentially, so partners that are leaving perhaps there's
Mm.
it's the last partner standing. That partner's going to be leaving. What are they going to do with the premises? But also, what are they going to be doing with the contract itself? And specialist companies can come in and take over the contract, and then they can look at ways in which, things to do with the premises, whether they go through a sale and lease back, or whether they put a lease in place where they'd sell the surgery, or they'd become landlords and then they would lease it to one of these organizations who would come in and take over the surgery. So they're the kind of the main options, really. Recruiting GP partners is the first port of call. Sale and lease back, or putting a lease in place, perhaps merging with a local practice or joining a super partnership, and then also transferring the contract to another entity. And all those things really are just to avoid having to close the surgery and sell the premises, which is obviously not really what anybody wants to think about, and which is why it's so important, I think, to put a succession plan in place.
Wow, so an awful lot to consider then. So
I know,
just
I just rambled there, didn't I, for about 10. I just got into a flow there. And
well, no, but there's an awful lot to consider. So in terms of people who'll be watching this little vlog, are they able to contact yourself or a member of your team just to kind of talk through a succession plan, maybe what that looks like, but also what are the actual options for their particular circumstance as well? And is it useful for them to contact yourself and you'll be able to talk them through that?
I think it's really important to get advice as early as possible, and yeah, we are absolutely available if they want to pick the phone up and have a conversation. We can talk them through the process of how what the process of putting a lease in place, how that works, how long that will take, but also put a potential sale and lease back as well. We can recommend organisations who can come in and potentially transfer the contract and take over the contract and things. So yeah, speaking to us as early as possible is certainly useful, but also just getting as much advice. There's advice from LMCs and their ICB as well. Just getting people as involved as early as possible is so important. One of our clients a couple of years ago, actually got in touch because their partners were retiring. They had 3 partners, but all of them were nearing retirement age. They were all really worried about being the last partner standing, and so what they did, they just decided to call it a day, and they said, rather than risking that last partner standing, they just decided to all retire early, and and yeah, and transfer and do that. So yeah, it's just really important that succession plan is in place. But yeah, we're absolutely here to help if needed.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Will. Your contact details are on the DKJ Health Hub, and I'm sure many will be in touch with you. Thanks for your time this morning.
All right, no worries. Thanks, Kieran. Take care. Cheers. Bye bye now.